So then we are back with a more understanding of the time of the Second Tabernacle services, where we find the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Tzayelic lineage, so then we can understand the time of the end. As per Mashiyach the prophet, we find layers of understanding of the spring feast, the autumn feast, and also the returning of the cities of the Mashiyach laid waste for many centuries. As we read then Mashiyach the prophet, we always make a reference of this particular prophet because he was very acquainted with the instructions given by the Creator himself during the time of Moses, when he was in the desert, and he formed the first holy city, and we find this time of the restoration period directly linked with the time of Moses. So then, what can we understand as far as the tabernacling and the prophecies of Daniel? Because the world is going through a very big shift, where we then read from the 12th chapter of Daniel, where he states then, "And knowledge shall increase." Firstly, he explains then his people would be becoming then roamers, or then they would be roaming the earth for a period of 1,000 years. And they did. In 1009, then the cities were no more. And then for 1,000 years, from 1009 to 2009, then came the time of deceit. So then, because of this restoration period, what can we gather as far as the actual news from the world, so then we can establish the truth regarding then Daniel the 12th chapter? Not only this, but sections of the 11th chapter, yet they are not deciphered. As we then, expecting the future to become very clearer, then comes the second situation regarding then people balancing their lives and then doing what the Mashiyach or the Savior said to do and observe. It's very sometimes easy for people only expecting others to do the work, and they are only there for the fun of it, and they want the information only to make themselves important. But then when the Mashiyach speaks, he wants people to change their lifestyles so then they can bear fruit, not only of understanding prophecies, but then understanding what the Mashiyach did for us. So then, reading from the Holy Instructions, we absolutely know as far as what the world then is doing to come up with the plans for the extension of the 1,000 years of the seat. Many nations of the world, they think because of the virtue of hard work and doing what they were doing for a long time, then should be a pretense of not having then the truth coming out and exercised. Let's make this point very clear. The Creator had let 1,000 years so then people and evils of this world could do whatever they wanted. And it was so for 1,000 years. But during this time, we are back on track as far as the holy instructions are concerned. We find then the restoration period of the holy cities coming back. And then the main focus point is then the region of Sudan. Sudan and Ethiopia, the region over there where there are so many situations taking place, we find then tabernacling returning. And this tabernacle is not going to become an entertainment for people. Sometimes when people they understand a bit of the holy instructions, they want to make a name for themselves. So then they learn, they exercise, they rehearse it, and then they want to be on their own as if they were part of some sort of a ministry of making their own names. But this truly is not the objective. The objective is doing what the Mashiyach said to do and observe, and teaching people how to bear fruit. How can a person bear fruit? Understanding the layers and then doing what the Mashiyach said to do and observe. When a person then is saved, obviously a person understands then revelation. Revelation means simply a person is revealed. revealed as far as what's coming in the future and the destruction of this age and the new world coming. As we then read from Mashiyach the prophet, the layer regarding then the holy cities you find in the 61st chapter, and the precise place where then the prophecy states on the land of Cush. If you want some sort of a precision, you have to find on the land of Cush. Now you have to do your homework. You can expect nobody else to take you by the hand and give you the information, and then you do nothing, only standing behind and then doing your talk. People have to put then work on it, so then they can bear fruit along with discovering more information. So then, the Mashiyach said very precisely, as far as bearing fruit, some of 10-fold, some of 100, and so on and so forth. What was then the Mashiyach explaining as far as bearing fruit? He was explaining of the Torah, the instructions, the prophets, and then teaching the people how to maintain the path. Now, many persons in this world, they want the benefits of understanding the instructions, but they refuse to have hardships and trials in teaching other people what the Mashiyach said to do and observe. There is an area of the belief where then they only maintain the laws of Moses. The other side, only the junky understanding of grace and sin. But then there is a midsection where a person can understand how Shaliach Shaul did understand it. So we must stay on the center of it as then the shilishim did. Now a person can become sort of relaxed and try to do either. Either a person is in sin and then relying on grace, or the other is concerned with law. Neither of them should be exercised, but both of them together, and taking the example from the Mashiyach and then the lives of the shilishim. So then, what is going on in the world as far as the new system? Said before many times, the Chinese system is coming, the Chinese system is coming, and the Chinese system is coming. And it did. We find then, a couple of months ago, it was an absolutely astounding situation regarding Alibaba and the Chinese system. And then you find in this day, when you read the news as far as for instance, India, coming up with a couple of very interesting news. Let's then understand what these mean, so then we are prepared. Then when we read the holy instructions, we have basis on how to explain the holy instructions and the prophecies. It's not only maintaining an understanding of knowledge, but it has to bear fruit. You can speak of the Holy Torah for the entire life, but if it doesn't bear fruit with existing news of the world, then there is not much into it. But when you combine them both, then you have basis of bearing fruit. So then, what can we understand as far as India? There is a project of 1,754 kilometers long with the Delhi Chennai, in explaining then that China is teaming up with India to have these railroads then constructed. This is the first great news. So the distance is 1,754 kilometers. If you divide this by 3, you find it then in miles. Or then, rather, if you divide these by the miles, this should be around 1,000 miles of railroad. But let's then evaluate what's the other news regarding then what's going on as far as the internet users. So then, explained before many times, people, they want to have the knowledge, they want to have the information, but they don't want to change their lifestyles. Because of these, then, it's not very easy for the Creator to use people on His terms, because people want to be used on their own terms, and it doesn't work. We must become available so then God can use us as per His instructions, not ours. But let's verify then what's going on as far as China and India. Besides this train line, what do you find as far as the internet users? Very interestingly, besides this train project, you find then 860 million internet users. As far as understanding these and the relationship with China and India, and then you find not only the railroad linked with it, you find then the internet users are doing trade via computer, as the instructions of Daniel gives us, and knowledge shall increase for the purposes of trade. Interestingly, you find then infrastructure and internet usage linked together. Now, if you are a somewhat smart person, you can understand Revelation, be saved, and read Daniel, and understand what simply these means. Infrastructure is going to be extremely important in every nation, because the new system via computer is truly coming. As it was then said many times before, the Chinese system is coming, and it did. Now, there are some situations regarding then the Bank of China linking up with other countries and then coming up with private banks linked with e-trade. As we read this situation, then when nations are not prepared for this new system, they're going to be left behind. The only situation is when they are linked with the system, then they want to have their packages delivered. And if a country does not have infrastructure enough for these deliveries, then it's going to have a lot of fight. For instance, some of the countries of Brazil playing around with this great project. They are not doing what they should be doing. This country, unfortunately, is bankrupt. The petrol company is bankrupt. And the nation is in an uproar because simply the people do not have the knowledge. The media, simply they are sold by the government. They are simply doing what the government wants. And the people, they don't try to study and obviously becoming aware of the world's news. They put their heads on the sand as ostriches, and they think then the world is going to change for their own benefit. So then, the simplicity of the situation is this. A person doing the same thing and expect another result means insanity. So a country that does not provide then infrastructuring services to the people, later on is going to become chaos. As it was said before, many times, infrastructure is extremely important. Because when the new system comes, then people are going to have their money on someplace else's system, and not only they won't be able to get taxes, but then where are the packages? So then, as China then is becoming more prominent as far as this new system, let's then make an evaluation of Daniel and then the holy city on the land of Cush, as precisely as then the prophet has mentioned. You find an area over there where you find then the first holy city during the time of Yohanan. But then, what is going on then with known as congregations or then churches? They are doing the same junk and they expect another result. The problem is this. The knowledge of the church is not enough for the understanding of the future. Not only they don't understand themselves, but they preach what they don't know. And people are paying these people to hear junk. Now, they want to try to fix an old system that truly didn't work. 1,000 years of deceit, 1,000 years of churches, those are then the very false prophets and people speaking of their own thinking. Because in 2 Corinthians 11:4 it states very plainly, if they don't receive the Spirit from the forefathers, this means the Hebrews, then what they understand then is not valid. Not saying that they are only evil people, only they are not informed properly. As far as we can understand very precisely, you find then the congregations of the Hebrews linked with tabernacling and the shilishim should be heard. If there are only congregations studying the Torah, then should be doubtful, because there is a balance of the Torah and the shilishim. It must have a balance. It must have both linked, so then we understand what's going on in the world, we understand how to produce fruit, and then we invite people to read the Torah. It's extremely important. But then not only this, as far as teaching, what do we understand of teaching? There are some people who are then entitled of teaching. Some people are not entitled of teaching. And explaining the holy prophecies simply then gives us a few understandings on how to maintain people on the path. Not only because of the Torah, but because of what the Torah did for the Mashiyach. He emphasized the path in the way that we should be concerned with, because there are many sectors of this world yet lining up with Ezekiel, with Daniel, with Yeshayahu. So then, as we then read more from these new times of the restoration period, then as we read more and more, you can find infrastructure extremely important, and then the knowledge increasing for the purposes of trade. There are some talks of linking up the northern Brazil with the nations of the north, Peru and the other areas. Can this situation be true? It can. However, is there a desire in the government to do it? Brazil is unfortunately sunk in debt and people stealing from the government. Politicians are as bad as thieves. In fact, they are licensed pirates, and then in many cases the government, there is no desire of placing those people then in jail. Because of these then, when the system comes, then chaos is inevitable. As we read then, China is going forward, and we hope at some point in the future this country can come to the senses and then do what they should be doing, in a normal understanding of this time of the restoration period, linking up infrastructure, because the new system truly is coming, and the third step of investment already included in it. Next time I'm going to explain more of the Mashiyach and his linking with tabernacling and Galah, in the enlightenment of this time of the restructuring and also development. So please stay tuned, much more coming up.